me, baby, 'cause he likes to
Roof to deck decoration and restoration.
Right.
Back in the studio, Mike. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So you've been last fall. You decorated a bunch of houses, and have you taken all those down now, or are they still up, or what's your timeline on that?
Right. So we're starting to take them down, kind of now.
Negative 10 degrees outside.
Exactly.
You might hold off.
So there's no. I mean, for most people, there's no rush. Some people there is, and if there is, then great, we'll take them.
Turn them off.
Yeah, just unplug them. It's no problem. They're off. And then you really don't want to take things down out of trees when it's this cold.
Yeah.
Because everything is so brittle. Right. Yeah. So we don't want to wreck anything. So if the customer allows us to wait till it's at least in the 20s or that sort of thing, then we're good.
Talk to us about going forward now. It's 2018. It's January of 2018. Talk about what your plan is now and how people are calling in and how you're scheduling work going forward. And before we get into too much of that, just keep people a little refresher on what it is exactly that they're calling in and scheduling.
Okay, so I always tell people we're kind of a calendar-driven business. So April through October, we're a exterior wood restoration company. So that's decks, fences, gazebos, porches, cedar shake roofs, clean and stain, that sort of thing. And then October, November, and a little bit of December, just like you mentioned, we design and install Christmas lighting. And then the winter time for the city of Roseville, and what I mean by that is the residents of Roseville, we plow snow.
Oh.
And then we do ice dam removal, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we also have a commercial division, and that's year-round. Again, when it's this cold, we can't get out there. But we wash tractors, trailers, parking garages, buildings, awnings, graffiti removal, all that stuff. In fact, we just did a graffiti removal job yesterday, even with these cold temperatures.
Really, where at?
It was in St. Louis Park.
Really?
Yeah.
So do you have some special solution you use to get
Yeah. There's, it's a kind of interesting thing. There's this company out of California that is just amazing, and they have all these different products for whatever that particular kind of graffiti is. Last year, there was somebody that wrote with like a Sharpie marker on one of those, those outdoor play things that kids, where it has slides and stuff, but it's kind of like that plastic type thing. It's not wood, and they had these like wet wipes. And, I called them and said, here's what I have. They sent out literally what felt like wet wipes, took the stuff right off like nothing. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, this people put it on glass, brick, stone, wood, anything, so, yeah. So there's kind of an application for almost anything.
That's funny because I was over in St. Paul yesterday at the rack shack that we're moving, and I go in the bathroom, and we got the drop down thing, for changing the changing table and all that stuff.
Right.
And it has got every gang, moniker that the Twin Cities has written on that thing.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
When you drop it down?
Oh yeah. You drop it down in where you put the kid. It's all written all on the sides, all over everywhere. On the.
Did you know that was there?
Yeah, I did, and it's like. I'm just going to wind up throwing this thing away and buying a new one because it's like, I'm not bringing this thing over to Egan, right?
Right. Well, I think what's relevant to homeowners with your business at rooftodeck.com, you can get a hold of Mike, is the roof issues that you see.
Yeah.
So some of your older 3-tab shingles certainly show that staining that's on there.
Yeah.
And people will think, and some 3-tab shingles are not that old.
Right.
Folks have gone to predominantly using an architectural shingle on a house, but there are still some 3-tabs out there, and if you have some trees around and things like that, you start to see this discoloration. And the buyer's first impression is that the roof is falling apart.
Right.
Talk a little bit more in depth about that.
So a lot of roofs will start seeing it in about 10 years. And GAF and some of the shingle manufacturers, they put granules in there where 10% of the granules are supposed to be copper, and then the dew every morning releases that. It's moisture that's required to make it work. And then it kind of prevents this algae, it's called Glocapsa from forming. And it's usually on the north side of a roof or where there's shade. It doesn't do well with strong sunlight. But in about 10 years, even roofs that have that will start kind of being susceptible to it. And like you said, it's 40% of your roof area is, or 40% of the viewing area of your house is your roof. Mm-hmm. So having those streaks, like you said, has a dramatic effect on the way the house looks. So it's very, very simple. We treat it with something called sodium hypochlorite, and that kills it. And then we just rinse it off, and it typically stays off for about 5 years.
And so there's no scrubbing or anything that's involved there.
It's a kind of, I would consider it a light rinse, or maybe a hard rain would be the way I would describe it. Now sometimes you'll actually get some lichens in there and some moss, So the moss
You have to remove that.
yeah, and that's a little more of an issue, and algae leads to moss. So if the black streaks, they come off like literally almost like butter. Moss will actually start growing roots into
Right,
the granules.
right.
So a little bit more of an issue there, and then they starting to loosen them up. So
What
yeah, it comes
about
right off.
what about the architectural? Keith, explain the difference. You said 3-tab.
Three-tab shingles, you look at your roof and it just kind of looks flat all the way across. For lack of a better term, there's not much depth there at all with the shingle. And the architectural style shingle, they're not uniform. So they have some angles to them, and then they have some different coloration that allows for this depth. And people have gone to that type of shingle.
More attractive.
Darker roofs seem to be more popular than lighter roofs right now for people to put in. If they're putting in a brown one, it's going to be a darker brown, the darker grays, those types of colors. And that stuff doesn't show up as much on those, but over time it will still.
Eventually, it starts
Always-
looking pretty bad. Yeah.
All roofs will wind up having the same issue.
Yeah, I mean, and it seems like it's got. I mean, when we were kids, we never saw this stuff, but they started using limestone to make shingles. I don't know how many years ago, say 20, 25 years ago. And limestone is actually a natural fertilizer for
Sure.
algae. So it's just become a bigger issue, and it was in the South. In the South, people have their roofs cleaned every year. In Minnesota, the growing cycle and everything, it's about 4 or 5 years.
And it gets 10 below or 20 below.
Right,
You know,
right,
it
right.
does-
And we-
take care of some of that stuff.
Right.
So when the people are calling in right now, what do you want people to call right now? What do you want? What are you looking for in terms of business?
What people are probably, I mean, it's not a lot of calls right now, because, I mean, we are a seasonal business, so the people that are kind of planning ahead will call in to have their deck, cleaned and stained, or their roof cleaned, like you said, or a cedar shake roof or deck, fence, anything like that. We'll really start, when it really starts to get busy for us, is probably about the middle of March, and then if the weather does what it normally does, April 1st, we're full on.
So if you want someone to get ahead of the curve, if you're proactive,
Yes,
you want to
schedule now.
get it done right away, call right now when they're not busy.
Right.
And get on the
Because it
schedule.
will, yeah, it is just unbelievable. 2017 was unbelievable for us.
Cedar shake
Busiest
roofs.
we've ever been.
Talk about cedar shake roofs because they were very popular for in the 80s. They were really popular, and now they've been replaced quite a bit because they are expensive. But they last forever if they're taken care of.
Right, right.
So what is the process with a cedar shake roof that would be different from, say, Keith's architectural shingles on his house?
So an asphalt roof is real basic. You're using sodium hypochlorite. You're killing this thing that's living on the surface. It's gone. Cedar shake. Okay, now you're talking wood. So there's 3 steps to it. We treat it with something called sodium percarbonate, and then that's what actually loosens up and loosens up the moss. And it's like OxyClean. You can practically, you can wash your hands in this stuff.
Yeah.
And anyway, you clean the roof, and it'll bring it back to that buckskin kind of color.
Right,
It almost
right,
looks like a
right.
brand new roof when we're done. So we put it on, then we wash it, and then that removes everything. And then you got to treat it with something called oxalic acid. And it's a neutralizer, gets it back to a base of 7. Then we let it dry, then we come out, we replace any missing shakes because cedar shakes, there's more maintenance to them.
Right.
And then we seal it with a sealer that, prevents, pushes it back, so we don't have to come back out for maybe 7 or 8 years
Okay.
before you might need it again.
So that's the cycle, about 5 to 7 years
Yeah.
is probably a good maintenance cycle for a roof like that.
So you could have used a company like this growing up. I grew up in a house with a cedar shake roof, and there's a couple spots up there you could almost
It
make
was
a
like,
bed on.
it was dirt.
Right.
It was dirt when they
Yeah.
went out there and did it.
Well, and the thing with cedar shake roofs, like you said, if you don't maintain them, moss and algae actually feeds on the wood.
Right.
They can't really feed on the granules on an asphalt roof. I mean, they're
Right.
feeding
Anchors to
on the limestone. But it's actually, if wood doesn't dry, it rots.
Yeah.
So maintaining a cedar shake roof is a good idea.
Shade is not a friend of a cedar
No.
shake
So
roof.
so decks as well then, yeah? You guys will get into
We do a lot of decks.
Do you
the
build
cedar
them or
decks.
just restore them?
Just maintain them. We don't do any building, right?
The cedar decks that are out there right now, do you get into, just talk a little bit about how far you'll go. If you have a cedar deck that's been sitting there for 15 years in a shady tree yard, you got 30 seconds.
Usually you don't have a lot of moisture issues. I mean, most people will clean off moss, right? Because you can walk your deck and you eat on it and stuff like that. So people will kind of take care of it, kind of. But no, it's the same process. Sodium hydroxide will actually remove the old stain, and then we wash it and stain it. Now, the big thing that's happening right now, and I'm watching the clock too, is that people are buying a lot of products that are water-based, and a lot of the government has tried to reduce the number of VOCs that are out there. Well, okay, the problem with water-based products is they don't come off. I mean, you can't power wash
Oh.
or strip water-based products. So the big news here, please, if you're gonna do it yourself, oil-based stain. It's maintainable.
Okay.
So we have a whole different process when we're doing painted decks.
Cool. Thanks for coming.
I tell him, honey, you can call me sugar anytime you please. Sugar.